You gonna help with the video? Hey, you gonna help with the video? Hi everyone, my name is Kayla and welcome back to Kay's Hidden Shelf where we talk about books. Today I have a little co-star with me. This is Pepper. She has been dying for cuddles and snuggles since the holiday break started and just chaos ensued. So today is the first quiet day we get where we can get back into routine and clearly she's taking advantage of it. So say hello to Pepper, and let's get into the first video of 2025. Today we are going to do a little recap, a little celebrating, and a look at my top 5 reads from 2024. The recap is going to be interesting because while I didn't read as much as I typically would in a year, I still had some really great reads, so much so that my average rating, I believe, was 4.6. Yeah, 4.6 stars overall, which that's a great year in terms of reading. So in today's video, you're not supposed to get the mic. Oh. So in today's video, we're going to be doing 3 things. The first is a bit of celebrating because the channel has reached 3 years. On January 10th, it has been 3 years since I started the channel back in 2022, which is just insane to think about. And there is so much to look back on, just from how far the channel has come to my own skill sets and views of reading, how my reading has changed. The friends I've made are just irreplaceable. The community that has built here as a result of starting this channel, I am just grateful for, and I appreciate all of you liking, subscribing, all the YouTube things, but mostly commenting in the comments below, sharing your favorite stories, what you love about reading, and just whatever it is your passion is in related to the videos. I love hearing about your reads, so I just am so thankful that all of you are here along the ride with me, have been for so long, and have continued to support the channel the way you do. I'm still a little flabbergasted that 3 years have gone by because it feels like a few months. And yet there's still so much to look back on in those 3 years, from how much I've grown as a reviewer, a reader even, how my reading has changed as a result of starting a YouTube channel, which is probably a video I'd like to do in the future. But just even the video editing is, I'm amazed that I was able to manage just changes in editing and improvements in it, even though they might seem subtle or small. Yeah, there's a lot to look back on in terms of the growth of the channel and myself as a result. So yeah, thank you all so much for 3 years, and cheers to the next one. Next, we're also going to be doing a little recap and looking back on my reading of 2024 in terms of stats. We're just going to take a quick glance at what my reading was like last year. And of course, we're going to be talking about a top 5 today. What were my top 5 reads from 2024? And it's such a hard call. I won't lie. It was so hard because my overall rating, just as an example, was, I think it was 4.6 stars out of 5. That was the average. That's great. I had a great reading year, clearly, but it made picking my top 5 very difficult. So before we look at the stats, I just want to explain quickly that typically I use Goodreads to track all of my reading. It's just the thing that I've used forever before competitors came out. But recently I've been testing out Fable just to see what it's like. And I've used Storygraph as well, just to see. That one was a little bit trickier because not as many of the books that I read were on there. They weren't in their system. And so it took a lot longer to get them added because I had to go through and manually add everything. There is a feature where you can put in the ISBN from Amazon, and the website will go and get the book and the information for you, but it doesn't always work. But yes, I just wanted to see what Fable was like in comparison with Goodreads and Storygraph. And so far, so good. It's early in the game, but it gave me some lovely stats, so we're going to look at those right now. Typically within a year, I put my goal as 52 On average, I'm pretty good at reading about one book a week, depending on the length of the book, keeping in mind too. And I don't always hit this goal. This is not how I've always read either. When I originally started getting back into reading, I read 3 books a year, 4 books a year, 10 books a year, and every year it just slowly increased until I got to about 52, and that's where my happy number has kind of settled. So the goal I put in Goodreads is just a random, well, not random, but a number I put in as what I anticipate I will likely read within that year. And I don't strive for it. If I don't make that goal, I'm perfectly okay with that because every year is going to be different. My reading is going to be different. My free time is going to change year after year. So this year I managed to read 46 books, which is pretty decent. And like I said, I had a 4.6 star rating. That was my average rating from everything that I had gone through. Now, the cute thing with Fable is it gives you a little description about your reading. Let's take a look at it. Fantasy sleuth, your penchant for unraveling mysteries in fantastical and tech-laden worlds suggests you'd be the detective in your own story, possibly solving it before the author finishes the first chapter. I don't know about that, but I'm definitely along for the ride, that's for sure. Now, I think it looks like November was my biggest reading month where I had the most reads. The summer was and September. Yeah, July, August, and September were definitely my slowest months overall. And yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot else, I think, in terms of stats that I track. Obviously, the biggest genre that I read, or the most genre that I read, is fantasy. And of course, there's subdivisions within the fantasy genre itself. But yeah, that's a pretty good year, in my opinion. Overall, it was a great reading year, and last year I tried to do something a little bit different. I don't try and set too many goals, I'll be honest, but what I did want to do was balance more of the traditional published books and indie self-published books that I read. There was a good chunk of a couple years where I was pretty well only reading indie, and that's not a problem because I love indie books, but there are so many traditionally published books that I want to get to as well. And so last year my goal was to just balance it better. Indie book, trad book, indie book, trad book, just going in between the two and trying to balance it out a little bit more so I can get to some of those books that I've so highly anticipated over the years. But also, I want to keep exploring indie books because they are also highly anticipated books for me too. And when it comes to looking at indie and traditionally published books, I just view them as a form of doing business. I don't view it in a terms of one being superior to the other. For me, it's how the author decided to do business. Did they want to work with an employer, for example, as a traditional publisher, or do they want to be self-employed? Because that's how I view the differences between the formats of publishing their books. For me, it's just a way of doing business. So yeah, I did succeed in that a little bit last year, and I'm going to keep trying to do that this year in terms of balancing them out better. There are a few big series that I am planning to get to this year, and we'll talk about that in another episode. But today we're going to be looking at my top 5 reads from 2024. Now, I say top 5 reads, and mainly that is for the algorithm. I've done this in past, and this is mainly my most memorable reads from 2024. The top 5 books that have stuck with me the longest, left an impact, whether it was just scenes standing out, the entire story standing out the way it did, or just leaving me emotionally scarred, because there are those books, and yes, they make this list. And without wasting any more time, let's dive into spot number 5, and that is Sundered Moon by Zamar Amir. This is a self-published indie book, and it is book 2 in the Book of Astea series, or duology, I should say, because there's only 2 books. And whoa, what an ending, what a just... It was packed. It exceeded book 1 in such an incredible way. It explored the world, the magic, the lore, the characters. It's a character-driven story, fantasy story, and it just took everything from book 1 and dialed it up to 20. It is such a phenomenal read and conclusion to the duology. I adored it. Now, there's even though it's a conclusion, there are still circumstances I have questions to, more that I want to see in this world. And I think that's just natural for me as a reader. I always want more from books that I love. But at the same time, it is such a satisfying conclusion. And it's just beautiful. Zamar did a phenomenal job with the duology with book one as well, but book two is really the standout of them. And I was really impressed with how he took the storyline, the plot, and the character arcs, because character-driven stories, when you have a big cast, this is multi-POV with several characters with individual voices, individual problems, and that's hard to capture. That's hard to develop and keep organized. And yet Zamar does it beautifully. There are characters in here that will stick with me for some time, and their arcs and their stories, because there were some that I just, it was like a dagger to the heart. I felt for them. There were others that I had to learn to love as the story went on. I struggled with them, I will be honest, at the beginning, but I learned to love them over time, especially as we get to see them develop. And then there are others who you hate. You doubt why you hate them, and then you remember you hate them for a reason. It's just such a beautiful dynamic of a cast, and the complexities of the world and the story. All of it is done brilliantly. It is a great duology to read, so I highly recommend you check it out if you love fantasy, lore, and a character-driven story. Oh, and I can't forget to mention all of the crazy, fantastical creatures in this, along with just brutal and dark tones. Book two gets much darker than book one, and it is so impactful. And just great action scenes as well. Can't forget that either. In spot number 4, we have Seasons of Avalon by Marche and Elan. Now, this is co-authored by 2 authors. It's a short story collection, if you will, and holy emotional damage was this dark. And I wasn't expecting that, because the cover looks like it's going to be a fantastical adventure. Maybe the main character on the cover is trying to save the world. I don't know, a quest trope, if you will. No, it's dark. It's depressing. It follows multiple characters throughout each short story. So each short story is focused on an individual character who you may see come up again in the next story, as they're all located in a small community. So you see how these characters' lives are in the day-to-day, and the tragedies that befall them one way or another. And some of it is through just accidents, and some of it is cause and reaction, and others is sacrifice. It's just a beautiful collection of heart-rending stories, and the authors did just a brilliant job at capturing these very human stories, these vulnerable moments in their lives, and how a community is meant to react, because this is a small community. Small communities, if you've never lived in or seen a small community, visited a small community, their lives are so interwoven in many ways. They rely on each other much more, and they've been around each other for so long, since the time they were children to the time that they're adults, and now their children are playing together, that they are fully engrossed in one another's lives. So just seeing how these situations impacted others in the community, and just the emotional damage. Yeah, just utterly brilliant storytelling and captivating. Absolutely. These are all set in a fantasy, and of course you get the fantastical creatures. Like I said, it is dark in tone, so keep that in mind. But it does have the, I guess, the style or reminiscent tone of Naomi Novik's Spinning Silver, for example, or Catherine Arden's The Winter Night trilogy. So if you've read either of those and you're familiar with that kind of fairy tale dark tone, this has it. Seasons of Avalon has it. And it follows the individuals in this community for the course of, I believe, a full year. So a full circle of the seasons: spring, summer, fall, winter. Now, I can't say anymore because this is a short story collection and saying anything else would be spoilers. But I will say, if you are looking for short stories or a shorter book that has impactful themes, just has that dark fairy tale tone that you love to read in other stories, and gives you such a deep and heart-wrenching look into these individuals' lives and the adversities that they face and the nature of the world, yeah, I would highly recommend checking this one out because it still hurts thinking about it in the best way possible. Number 3. This was such a hard call, guys. I had such a hard time with which one should be number 3, because the two above it, it's hard. I'll try and explain. Number 3 is The Gallant by Janny Wirtz. Now, I read this novella last year, and it's like a fever dream at this point. I remember everything that happened, and I remember the orders that it all happened in. I remember the characters, and I remember how blown away I was with the conclusion of it. People talk about the Sanderson's got nothing on Janny Wirtz when it comes to the endings of her story, because holy, what just a beautiful avalanche of events and stories and characters and everything that happened, and it feels like a fever dream to this day. Now, the story follows 2 main characters, Verrain de Sient and his love interest, Lysane. Verrain finds himself to be the focal point of a plot to unravel some political secrets, but unfortunately the plot leaves him insane. Essentially, it leaves him a madman, rambling and raving and unable to care for himself. And when his family essentially decides that he is not worth the risk, they want to send him off. But Lysane, his love interest, disagrees and says he deserves humanity and care. So she goes with him, and their story follows from there. And I wish I could put into words how incredibly woven this story is. Like I said, it feels like a fever dream. I don't even know if it's years or a year or months that pass. It has to be over a year at least, but I don't know how many years it follows. But the story is just remarkable. It's moving. It has action in it as well. And it's such a character-driven story. I don't even say it's character-driven because it really is just being immersed in these 2 characters' circumstances and what happens as a result of their choices. And despite this being a novella, I took my time with this for 2 reasons. One, the story has so much depth to it. There's foreshadowing in places you would never think there's foreshadowing. And in terms of its writing style, it is unlike anything I've read. And I loved it. I had to take my time to soak it all in. And I think that's a pretty common sentiment when it comes to Janny's writing. So yes, her novella, The Gallant, absolutely makes this list. And like I said, it was so hard to put it in number 3. And I'm still debating if it needs to be in number 2. But regardless of what spot it's in, it's still one of the most memorable reads I had from last year. And I am so excited to continue with her other books as a result of it because, like I said, Sanderlanche got nothing on Janny. Next, in spot number 2, and this, again, it's such a hard call between this one and Janny's The Gallant, but we're doing it, and that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. Why? Because I devoured this. I loved it. I will read it again in a heartbeat. It was surprising. It just had so many elements to it that I never anticipated for the type of story. And a lot of it is due to the way the story is told. And I'm getting ahead of myself. But this is a story that follows Piranesi, a man in his giant house. He doesn't remember where he came from or how long he's been there. He just knows it's him and the house. And the house has a giant ocean in it. It has a lot of oddities. It is crumbling in sections. It is massive. It's maze-like. And there's just an enormous amount of mystery around all of it. And Piranesi, because he doesn't remember much after a certain point of memory. he does not remember much about himself or about the house. So a big reason why this works so well is the perspective we are seeing it through. We are seeing it through Piranesi's eyes. He adores the house. It gives him fish. It keeps him alive in his view, even though he has to go in full survival mode. Hunt, scavenge, build. He wanders the halls trying to map them out. And there's only one other person in this house, and they don't interact very often. The other man is quite, a distant personality compared to Piranesi. Piranesi adores the house, and he lacks things, but he is content. He is happy. And yet there's so many questions. How did he get there? Why is he living there? What is this ginormous labyrinth of a house with crumbling statues of minotaurs and people and skeletons that litter it as well? How is he happy in this circumstance? And so this story, I can't say much for spoilers, but it being told through Piranesi's eyes gives you a bit of naivety, because he is so enraptured with the house and he is content with what he has. And yet everything that develops as a result, he still maintains that. He is a smart individual as well. But to have that nature in the circumstance that he does makes this story what it is, I think. It really adds a level of just intensity to it because there are so many unknown factors and we're seeing it through Piranesi's eyes. We also don't know a lot. Because Piranesi doesn't, we don't either. And as developments happen and things occur, slowly the pieces start to fall into place, and it's just so satisfying when it all does, but also remarkable at how complex it all is. So I can't say anything more than that, but yes, this one blew me away. I think I read it in a day or two, and my non-reading husband even picked it up because of how I raved about it. And so yeah, it is definitely on this list because what a story. And I hope to come back to it, honestly, because I think there's so much that I missed in my first reading that in terms of foreshadowing, that I would love to go back and see how early the seeds and all those moments start. But yeah, highly recommend this one too. Has that been changing the whole time? Not sure what happened there, but the background light was changing colors for some reason. It decided to change modes while we were filming. That is the joy of making videos. So before we get into the last book on this list, the top book on this list, if you will, in terms of algorithm, we're going to cover some runner-ups. Now, I'm not going to delve too much into them. We're just going to pop them quick on the screen here. But the runner-ups, I've got 4, are The Crimes of Rooker Flynn by A.R. Witham, The Blue Flames by Jacqueline Hagan, Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, and Gog Magog by Jeff Noon and Steve Beard. And now for the last book on the list, I'm going to show you the trilogy and we'll talk about the main book that appears on the list. But that is, drumroll please, The Empires of Dust trilogy by Anna Smith Spark. This is probably my favorite and most memorable read from 2024. I was not expecting anything from it. I had picked it up randomly as a buddy read, and I think half the people that started the buddy read ended up DNFing it, and yet I couldn't put it down. I can't remember the last time I read a trilogy so quickly. This is just a phenomenal fantasy read. It's political. It's heavily character driven if you love character driven stories. And The House of Sacrifice, which is the final book in the trilogy, is just phenomenal. Now, this trilogy is dark. This is dark fantasy, and I'm talking darker than Joe Abercrombie as far as I've read from Joe Abercrombie. No one is safe. No one. Absolutely no one. The cat, the dog, the baby, the kids, the mom, the dad, no one. Grandma, no one. No one is safe in this book. It is dark, so please keep that in mind. This is not the read for everyone, and somehow I just fit perfectly for me. I absolutely adored it. And I think a big reason for that was how heavily character driven this story is. We get multi POVs centered around one main character and the events of that main character, or the events that he causes inevitably. But the way we look at these characters, we get their moments of vulnerability, we get their moments of grief, their moments of doubt, all of it. But a big factor of this is just insanity. The main character is just unhinged, and it's hard to put down. The characters that follow this character around or are affected as a result of this character's actions, they are just equally compelling. It's hard to pick a favorite character out of this series because each of these characters in their own rights are equally captivating. They have such satisfying, somber, and holy, it just, all of it, all of the emotions that go along with it. And it's not a story of good or bad. It's not a story of who's right and wrong. It's just a story of people, the choices they make, and what comes after. And whether or not it's good, it's right or wrong, it's what it is. And that adds a level of believability to it, a little bit of realism to it. And there are moments that were just so hard to read and still I couldn't put them down. And I cannot say enough about this. I really can't. There is a lot of war. There's a lot of politics. Well, more war than politics, but politics are, of course, a play in it as one main character strives to conquer all of the kingdoms. And the magic, all of it. I will say it's a low fantasy, so there is not as much magic as you might find in other books that it could compare with. But for what it has and the magic that's in there, it's enough to remind you that it's not real. You are safe, you're okay. And the themes that it delves into, from depression to grief to just being lost in life, all of it is incredibly well done. So yes, this trilogy, specifically The House of Sacrifice, how it all comes together at the end, utterly incredible. I would love to come back to this trilogy again because of how insane it is. There's just moments where I was left in utter disbelief. I needed to take time to process everything that was happening, and I did, of course, fall behind on the buddy read as a result, but that didn't matter because I was having a good time. And Anna Smith Spark has absolutely earned the title of Queen of Grimdark for a reason. If you are into grimdark, if you are into that style of storytelling and fantasy and character-driven arcs and characters you love to hate, hate to love, and all of it, this is a must-read trilogy for 2025. So those are my top picks from 2024 in terms of my reading. There were so many good reads last year. It was really hard to pick just 5 and then runner-ups. I wish I could put more on here, but here is a quick glimpse of the books that I did read in 2024. Like I said, I had an average rating of 4.6 stars, so take that as you will. If a cover catches your eye, by all means, pick it up. And I did last year, I had done a section in this type of video for narrators. I'm not doing it in this video. I think I might do a separate video for it because I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I do immersion reading typically, and there are so many amazing performances out there. So I do want to do another category or its own video for audiobook narrators to acknowledge the amazing work and performances that they do to bring these stories to life as well. So look forward to that video in the future, as I will have that out hopefully by the end of January too. In the meantime, what was your top read of 2024? I would love to know because we all need a good TBR buster at the end of the day. In the meantime, thank you so much for watching, everyone, for joining along in the last 3 years of videos and gushing about books and all of the amazing chats that have come along the way as a result. And I wish you all the best in 2025. Have some great reads. If it's not working for you, it's okay to put it down. Find the great ones and enjoy your reading, and have a wonderful and healthy, happy 2025. As always, everyone, thank you so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.